So hello everybody, I am Kirsty from J and PR, a PR agency based in Wellington. And I'm here today to talk to you about two industries really. Journalism, which was my first career that I went into, and then later I went into PR. So what was my route to the industry? Good question. I was very fortunate. I always wanted to be a journalist from the age of 12, and just remember that number, 12. I started doing work experience at the local newspaper when they allowed you to go in at the age of 11 and 12. And I made a bit of a bugbear for myself, to be honest. And I went in during half terms, and I've still got the cuttings to this day of very small articles I wrote, but they were published by me, and some with my name, which I was very proud of. So when I did my GCSEs, I went on to do A-levels because I wanted to do A-levels. That's not always the right option for everybody. So I'll tell you about my business partner's route to her career separately. But I did A-levels, and I chose, just like Holly was just talking about, the ones I loved. Because if you don't love the subject you're learning about, it becomes a bit more difficult for you. So I chose English, law, and sociology. And actually, they all played a really big part in my career as a journalist. And then I went on to university to do a journalism degree. Now that's really important for me. I went to do a journalism degree because I wanted to be a journalist, but the option of which university I went to was really important because I could do a journalism degree at many, many places across the UK, but actually it was important for me to go to one that was accredited by the National Council for the Training of Journalists, because that meant after 3 years I finished with a degree, but I also finished with my NCTJ qualifications. So that was my shorthand, my media law. And it meant that I could leave that degree and go straight into being a journalist. If I hadn't have done an NCTJ accredited course, I would have then have got my degree and gone on to do a transition course with the NCTJ for a further 10 months. So I saved myself 10 months and was able to leave my course to be a journalist. Now that sounds really exciting until you start applying for jobs. And I've heard lots of stories where people sent off hundreds and hundreds of CVs and didn't get a job. Fortunately, I sent my CV off to the Evening Leader in Wrexham and had a call and had an interview. And I was the only one off my degree course to go straight onto a daily newspaper. And I was very, very proud of that. And I was very, very lucky to get some really good advice off my lecturer at the time, because I'll never forget walking up to my amazing lecturer at the University of Central Lancashire in Preston, at the accredited university. It was the second best university in the country at the time. And I went up to Louise and said, guess what? I've been offered a job at the Evening Leader on a daily newspaper. I'm not going to accept it because I'm going travelling for 12 months. To which she said, and it was the best piece of advice I've ever been given, Kirsty, don't be so stupid. Take that job, even if you only take it for 6 months, and then go travelling, because that means you would come back from travelling as a journalist and not as a graduate. And that was the best piece of advice I've ever taken, because she was right. If I'd gone travelling, I would have come back as a graduate and been in the same pot of graduate applications as hundreds and thousands of people across the UK. But instead, by taking that first job on a daily newspaper, I remained as a journalist. And I did fit in some travelling as well. So I started off at the Evening Leader in Wrexham on the daily newspaper, so print media, which I specialised in at university. And then I applied for a job at the Shropshire Star, which I was very proud to apply for that job because I was born and bred in Shropshire. So it was the daily rag that was delivered through my mum and dad's letterbox every day that I could remember as a child. And I got that job. So I moved to a bigger newspaper. The circulation at the time for the print publication of the Shropshire was 98,000 copies every day. You'll understand that print media has decreased, so the circulation figures aren't that high now, but I was very, very proud. And I worked my way up from being a trainee journalist, because you still go on as a trainee even though you're fully qualified. And then I worked my way up as a senior journalist. I acted as sub-editor, I did acting deputy news editor, and then a guy that worked there for many years was retiring, and he was the crime correspondent. And I thought, I'll go for that. Big shoes to step into, and I got the job. So I covered all of the murder trials in the area, lots of various crime and cases that you'll have read about and heard about on the radio and on national news that we have in Shropshire. And I covered that for 6 years. So that was the pinnacle of my career as a journalist, being the crime correspondent, because I got my exclusives. I led the way in Shropshire. I had national journalists ringing me up asking for the news stories because they couldn't quite get to where they wanted to be in Shropshire because they didn't have the local contacts like I did. So I was the only regional print journalist to cover the inquest of Princess Diana. Now, how did I get into that courtroom? There was only 15 of us for 17 weeks at the High Courts in London. I applied for the gold card to get me in through those doors, and I was rejected. They said, no, you're a relatively minor journalist in Shropshire. We don't need you in the courtroom, but we will have ABC Australia, ABC America, and everybody else going. To which I appealed and said, well, actually, the sole survivor of the crash lives in Shropshire. And they said, you can come into the courtroom. And while I was in the courtroom in London for 17 weeks, we were waiting for the sole survivor to give his evidence. So we'd been there about 9 weeks by this point, and there's 15 journalists, myself and 14 others, sitting on the press bench. And the day Trevor Rees-Jones walked in with his legal team, you could hear a pin drop, and he walked in and he looked at the press bench and said, "Morning, Kirsty, how are you?" And I've never gained so many friends so quickly in all my life, because all of those national and international journalists wanted the exclusive story from that man. And for him to be naming me and saying hello to me, they realised that it was quite important, the contact I had. So after being a journalist for several years at the Shropshire Star, and I was always going to remain as a journalist, I had 2 young children. My husband worked away, and a very good friend of mine was also a journalist at the Shropshire Star, but she had been given an opportunity by somebody that was retiring due to ill health to run a PR agency. And she took on that agency as a one-man band in Shrewsbury. So she was a public relations consultant. And this is a route that many journalists go to, because they either don't want to be working 24/7 as a journalist, and they want to sit on the other side of the fence, as we call it. So what is a public relations consultant? So if you imagine, as a journalist, you are receiving press releases from PR teams from various organisations like the local council, high street stores, Argos, Tesco, everything you read in a print publication or on an online news site, or that's been run across the media outlets, has probably come from a PR team somewhere, communications team. So as a journalist, we received all of those, and then we developed the story further and got that into whatever media outlet we were working for at the time. As a PR consultant, you're the other side. You're sending that news to the journalists. So Ria, my business partner, worked really hard and built up a very good client base across Shropshire, but she needed an extra pair of hands and asked me to join her in the business. Massive decision for me, because I always thought I'd be a journalist forever. But actually, personal circumstances, 2 young children, it was going to work for me much better. So I joined her in 2012, and we have grown the business together. And we now have 8 of us in the team based in our office in Wellington. That role as a PR consultant has developed significantly over the last 8 years. So we used to write press releases as our main base of what we did. But obviously we've moved into the digital world very quickly. So social media management, design for social media images, video, photography, all of these skills now make up the role of a PR consultant. So if you love English, like I loved English, then being a journalist or being a PR consultant is definitely a career that you can consider. But if you think, well, I absolutely can't stand English, but I am amazing at graphic design, then PR could be for you too, because we have to design material, we have to design images for social media, we have to design infographics. If you think you love photography and videography, then a role in the media could definitely be for you. A role in PR could definitely be for you. So it's really, really important that you don't just think of English when you think of the world of journalism and PR. I've got lots of friends who have made a great career out of photography. So a guy who used to work with the Shropshire Star is very much on the red carpet. He was chosen exclusively to take the photographs at the Remembrance service that you would have seen televised the other Friday, Saturday night before the Remembrance Sunday. And he was chosen exclusively as one photographer at the whole of the UK to take those photographs. And he started with Midlands News Association. So that's my route, but my business partner's route is very different. And when we do careers fairs and we do a bit of a double whammy, she tells her story that she did her A-levels and actually didn't want to go to university. So she chose an in-house route where she went to Midlands News Association and did on-the-job training, so equivalent of an apprenticeship today. And she worked her way up, she passed the course, worked her way up like me, and then took on the role of the director of a successful PR firm. So even though we have two very different routes, we've ended up at the same place. And that just shows, just like Holly was talking about, you've got to choose the route you love. I loved the academic side, I loved college, and I really wanted to go to university. Ria did not want to do that, but the in-house training, the on-the-job training was perfect for her, and we've both ended up in equal positions. So really, really important. Why do I love doing what I do? The skills I've had to utilise. I love talking. Holly will vouch for that. I love meeting people. So in my job as a journalist, I met different people from all walks of life every day of the week. Absolutely amazing to deal with these people. And I always felt very privileged that people would choose to talk to me. As the crime correspondent, you can imagine the families I dealt with, the victims' families, the families of those that have just been put behind bars, which is a very difficult position to be in. Journalists aren't always liked people, but if you can win them round and they want to talk to you, then all the better. So for me, it's definitely about the people buy into people, building that trust. And then with the PR side of things, the pride of having the responsibility to represent a business. So, you know, managing directors are giving the responsibility to me to manage their reputation, because that's what we're doing every day of the week, is managing the reputation of our clients. And that, again, I feel very privileged to do. I love the fact we now employ people, giving those jobs and opportunities to others. We're renowned for giving work experience opportunities, because I absolutely love the fact that I had that opportunity, and without my work experience, I would not have got my place at the University of Central Lancashire. I will never forget the day I got my A-level results, which should have been 3 A's and weren't quite 3 A's. And I phoned the course leader at Preston, crying my heart out, and said, I haven't got my grades. And he said, be quiet, Marston, which was my surname then. Be quiet, Marston, you're in anyway. And that was because I'd sent my work experience portfolio to him and kept it updated throughout the process of application to university. He knew my name, he knew what work I'd done. I'd gone the extra mile. So somebody that got 3 A's but hadn't got any work experience may not have got their place on a course that was very prestigious and very limited. So really, really important to get some work experience under your belt as soon as possible. But for me, being a journalist, I loved every second of my career. Being a PR consultant, I love every second of my working day. I sometimes forget that I am actually working. Working and running a business in a pandemic has been interesting, but communication has been king. We have had to communicate around the clock for our clients. So I'm still working to deadlines, just as I was as a journalist. So as Holly said, do what you love. Make sure you work really, really hard, because I don't believe anybody should necessarily get anywhere without working hard. You have to work hard to get to where you want to be. Nobody gets given anything these days. So any questions, anything following on from this, we are business friends with HRC, so please do drop us a line. Catherine's got all my details. We will help you to get to where you want to be, but you have got to work hard. Do what you love and enjoy.